komt hij over de finish. En nu is het gebeurd. Uitstekend, Hennie Kuiper. Bravo, jongen. Dat heb je geweldig gedaan vanmiddag.
Welcome back, everyone. No rest day for the Cycling Iceberg podcast, as you just heard commentary on the 1977 Tour de France. Specifically, you listened to the Dutch commentator commentating on the finish of stage 17 on Alpe d'Huez. The Tour had a fantastic battle for the overall win between Bernard Thévenet, Lucien van Impe, Hennie Kuiper and several other riders. It was a wide open battle. In 2 days' time, the 12th stage of this year's Tour will start in Auch, a nice city which I visited multiple times. The city is quite old and the center is scenic. It has very old buildings and there's a beautiful cathedral on top of a hill. From there you can look out over the city. But we're not here to discuss my sightseeing there. We're here to discuss that 1977 Tour de France, and Auch, despite featuring super early in the race, had a decisive role in it. In 1997, the Tour wasn't nearly as commercial as it is right now. Sure, it was becoming more of an independent entity. Reminder that the race had been founded to boost sales of newspapers, but in this era, newspaper readership was dwindling down because TV was on the rise. The Tour therefore looked for ways to increase revenue, but at that time, selling the Grand Départ for a lot of money wasn't really common. In fact, that's why the Tour could still start in very small towns, like in 1977. The tiny town of Fleurance in the Gers region hosted the Grand Départ. I've also visited that town multiple times, but that's enough about me. As the riders gathered for the prologue, the newspapers published their previews. They determined that the course of this year's race was very light in terms of climbing. In their eyes, this made Bernard Thévenet of Peugeot, who had won the 1975 Tour, the favourite. They also tipped Lucien van Impe, a Belgian racing for Lejeune. Van Impe was the defending champion and was the best climber. However, there were just few stages for him to make a difference. This opened the door for Joop Zoetemelk and Raymond Delise from Mico to dream about the Tour win. The Dutch-French duo could be dangerous. Further, there was Hennie Kuiper from Raleigh. He too stood a chance. Then there was of course Eddy Merckx from Fiat. His legacy was too big to ignore, but he had been in decline, so little was expected from him. The prologue in Fleurance was surprisingly won by debutant Dietrich Thurau, who also took the first yellow jersey. His team, TI-Raleigh, was extremely happy with his win. Raleigh was a big team, so winning the stage or wearing the yellow jersey, that didn't matter too much to them. No, what mattered was that Raleigh was a bike manufacturer and they wanted to break through on the German market. Thurau was their perfect poster boy. He was a young, handsome and outspoken German, making him popular in his home country. Team manager and directeur sportief Peter Post said that they would defend the jersey of Thurau for as long as possible. The next morning, the Tour set out for the first real stage. I just mentioned increased commercialization, and this is an example of it. The stage was split into two parts. First, they raced 140 kilometers from Fleurance to Lectoure, and then another 97 kilometers from Lectoure to Auch. However, there was no break between these two parts. Once the finish line of the first part of the stage was crossed, the race immediately continued with the current time gaps in place. The reason for this was that Lectoure this way technically hosted a finish and could increase the fee that they paid towards the race. However, general classification times would only be taken in Auch. The double flat stage was won by Pierre-Raymond Villemien. Thurau finished 6th and kept the yellow jersey, but his leader Kuiper wasn't paying attention. He sat at the back of the peloton all day, got held up by a crash in the final, and lost 15 seconds in the streets of Auch. The following day, the riders already entered the Pyrenees, unusually early in the route. The first mountain stage was immediately a hard one, featuring the Aspin, Tourmalet and Aubisque. Kuiper attacked to regain the time he lost in Auch. He got a gap on the peloton, together with Van Impe. Behind them, Thurau only thought about his yellow jersey. He chased down his own GC leader with the help of Merckx. A bit later, Kuiper was ordered to drop back to defend Thurau's position. He dragged the entire peloton back to Van Impe, after which Thurau won the stage in a sprint. The long flat section after the Aubisque meant that there was always the possibility that Thurau could have come back with his group. However, it was clear that the pecking order within the team had changed. Kuiper, who started as a leader, was not being respected. He needed to look after Thurau rather than utilize one of the few mountain stages there were to gain time. Kuiper was a climber, perhaps not as good as Van Impe, but he still needed to use the mountains to build some form of buffer for the time trials. The yellow jersey clearly gave Thurau extra morale though. He surprisingly won stage 5B, a longer time trial. Raleigh then spent extensive energy controlling the peloton, making sure no breakaway would take the yellow jersey. This allowed Thurau to reach stage 13A, held in West Germany, wearing the yellow jersey. Thurau's popularity in Germany was great news for Raleigh, but within their team there were doubts about the race leader's position. He caused tension due to only thinking about himself. Nevertheless, Post believed in a Tour win for Thurau, and Kuiper's ambitions were put aside. While Post might have believed in a Tour win, the press was certain Thurau would fade in the Alps. The German had never shown anything in the mountains. He was a classics rider after all. His lead of 50 seconds on Merckx, 1 minute 20 on Thévenet and 1 minute 40 on Kuiper wasn't deemed enough. The press worries turned out to be justified. In stage 15B, a mountain time trial, Thurau completely cracked. He lost 2 minutes and 38 seconds. The stage was initially won by Zoetemelk, but he later received a 10-minute penalty for a positive doping test. That resulted in Van Impe being declared the stage winner, while Thévenet took the yellow jersey by 11 seconds on Thurau, with Merckx at 25 seconds. Van Impe sat at 33 seconds and Kuiper at 49. Clearly the GC was extremely close. Thurau at 11 seconds believed he could potentially still make a play for the overall. However, he got dropped in the mountains the following day. Nevertheless, much like in the Pyrenees, the stage design allowed him to come back. He won the stage in a sprint, although there were no time bonuses to help him move into the yellow jersey. Thurau's strategy of coming back on the downhill wouldn't hold in stage 17, which featured the first and only summit finish of the race. The hardest stage featured the Madeleine and Glandon before featuring on Alpe d'Huez. Thurau cracked early on and lost over 12 minutes. TI-Raleigh finally focused on Kuiper, giving the Dutch leader the support he deserved. Despite all the internal bickering, he was less than a minute down in GC. On the Glandon, an attack by Van Impe did serious damage to the favourites group. The Belgian topped the climb in the virtual GC lead. Behind him, it was Thévenet who led the chase, with Zoetemelk and Kuiper in his wheel. Thévenet had a much bigger engine than Van Impe, so the gap was slowly brought down in the valley to Alpe d'Huez. As Van Impe's lead declined, cars and motorbikes rushed past him. One TV car, however, smashed into Van Impe. His rear wheel was broken, causing him to lose 2 minutes. 6 kilometers from the top, Kuiper made his move. He had profited from Thévenet's wheel for long enough. He'd conserved energy and now could use that. He quickly stretched out a gap over the tired Frenchman. As Kuiper moved towards the virtual GC lead, he was encouraged by Post from the team car. Crucially, however, he was not informed of the time gaps. He wasn't aware that he was on his way to potentially take the yellow jersey. In the final kilometer, Kuiper therefore took it relatively easy. He shifted gears a couple of times and took in the ambience of the Dutch mountain before winning the stage. Thévenet came in second and crucially managed to hang on to the GC lead by just 8 seconds. Without the 15 seconds lost in Osh, or with a bigger push in the final kilometer, Kuiper would have taken the GC lead. Outside the mountain stages, the 50-kilometer time trial of stage 20 would decide the Tour. Thévenet and Kuiper were evenly matched in the time trials, but the Frenchman benefited from leading the GC. Even the Dutch papers knew it would be extremely hard for Kuiper to still win the Tour. As the Frenchman was in the yellow jersey, he had far more motors around him. Kuiper was faster in the first part of the time trial, but simply couldn't match his rival in the second part. Thévenet won the time trial by 28 seconds over Kuiper. Kuiper knew after this the win was out of sight. The final 2 flat stages around Paris and the 1-lap time trial on the Champs-Élysées didn't bring any major changes to the GC. Thévenet won his second Tour by 38 seconds over Kuiper, with Van Impe finishing third. While Kuiper isn't at all a bitter personality, and he didn't complain at the time, he is quite sure that he would have won the Tour if he'd been more alert in the streets of Osh. There are a few lessons to be drawn from this story. First of all, it's a classic example of a sponsor interest versus a general team interest. It's not new that in the Tour de France there are stories about the team wanting to win with a rider of their own nationality. Well, that technically doesn't go up here for Raleigh because it was a Dutch team, but the commercial reasons for them to favor the German are the same stories we read about in 2019 when it appeared Ineos would prefer winning with a British rider over a Colombian rider. Similarly, it's been suggested that Movistar would favor their Spanish leaders for the same commercial purposes as in this case Thurau was favored. Somewhere in here there's also a parallel to be drawn with this year's Giro. There's been a lot of hindsight reasoning that in the 2025 Giro, UAE should have backed Del Toro earlier in the race. I think to an extent that's true. UAE didn't play their cards well. Del Toro should have been used to pressure the others, especially at that point still Roglic, early on. Why is UAE chasing down a break in which Del Toro is, with also up the road Carapaz, Bernal? They could have knocked Yates out of contention there. However, at the same time, I also get why they wanted to keep Ayuso in GC. Sacrificing Ayuso I don't think would have been the right decision. Let's draw the parallel to 1977 then. There we saw that it was Thurau, a young upcoming rider who appeals to a big market, doing well early on. Raleigh decides to fully back Thurau early on, sacrificing the chances of Kuiper. In the end of the race, that sacrifice costs Kuiper. It's not just that he lost time in Osh or didn't receive the time gaps on the Alp, he also squandered other opportunities babysitting Thurau. Kuiper was eventually the stronger rider, the more proven one, and he didn't get the opportunity to gain time in the Pyrenees. There were other stages in which his domestiques wasted energy, which they could have used to help him later on. Draw that back to that Giro then. What if Ayuso stays healthy? He might have been the strongest rider in the race. Sure, they should have played their cards better there, but I can see the parallels where perhaps if Ayuso does stay healthy and stay in the race until the end, they've backed Del Toro early on, but his climbing in the final week isn't strong enough, like we've seen with Thurau. Of course, Del Toro isn't Thurau. He is a climber, we know he can climb, and unlike Thurau, he's not a classics rider. I get that the comparison here isn't picture perfect, but I do think somewhere there is a parallel and a reality in which it could have been beneficial for UAE to keep Ayuso in there. Just pulling the card Del Toro right away at that moment wouldn't have been right, just like for Raleigh, it wasn't right to fully back Thurau so early on in the Tour. Finally, regarding Kuiper then, I think he deep inside might be the best Dutch rider ever. It's just that he never won the Tour, which means that the attention always goes out to Jan Janssen and Joop Zoetemelk. Now we'll probably at some point get a discussion if Van der Poel should be included, based on his classics performances, but that's hard to compare. It's hard to beat winning the Tour. That's also why Kuiper is never really mentioned in those discussions. He would never go on to win the Tour, although he would finish second behind Zoetemelk in 1980. He won the World Championships in 75, and the longevity of his career in such an era is truly special, because 10 years after that world title, he won Milan-San Remo, 1985, completely different generation of riders he's been up against. With that, the rest day lore episode of the Cycling Iceberg podcast comes to an end. Enjoy the rest day, and we'll be back in 2 days with another episode regarding the 12th stage, this time however focusing on the finish, the Hautacam.